Did you know that Ferrari did not suffer a double abandonment in a race from Canada 2024? And that just before their career at home, they repeated that disaster in Zandvoort? What is happening in Maranello? Today we analyze how the GP of the Netherlands completely uncovered Ferrari's internal cracks. Chaos for Ferrari began long before the first abandonment. From free training in Zandvoort, the SF25 showed symptoms of instability under mixed conditions. The aerodynamic configuration of the car, adjusted for a dry race, was not properly modified for a changing climate that had already been predicted since Saturday. This initial error was the first domino that would fall into a sequence of misguided decisions. The data showed asymmetric degradation in the tires and an erratic behavior of the rear axle when the grip fell below a certain threshold. This was ignored by the box's wall, which instead of reacting with precise adjustments, decided to maintain its original career program. When the race began, Lewis Hamilton was in the upper half of the grille, actively fighting with the Mercedes and the McLaren. A reflection of what was expected was a strategic battle, not a technical disaster. The British had rhythm, he was pushing strongly and communicated constantly with his engineer Riccardo Adami to explore stop windows that allowed him to execute an effective undercut about Russell. But just when the first raindrops began to fall in Sector 2, Ferrari chose to stop Leclerc, instead of a Hamilton who had already reported on radio that the grip was disappearing. This decision marked the point of no return. Hamilton was forced to complete another return in clearly slippery conditions. Upon entering Curve 3, the most iconic pair of the Dutch layout, the combination of wet paint and slicks tires became a trap impossible to avoid. The rear of the SF25 slid offline, which caused an immediate control loss. Telemetry caught how the car ranged violently at the entrance of the Perrault, and although Hamilton tried to correct the trajectory with a subtle contravol, the car had already crossed the point of return. The impact was inevitable. The car turned to the inner wall and stopped with significant damage in the right front suspension. The seven-time world champion, who had shown signs of progress in his integration with the team, was left out on Tour 23. But the most shocking thing was that, instead of learning from the mistake made with Hamilton, Ferrari repeated the pattern with Leclerc. The Monegasco had been managing an aggressive race, trying to stay within the top 5. When a melee fight began with Kimi Antonelli, the young Mercedes talent, the track had already entered a critical phase of irregular humidity. In full acceleration in that same second sector, Antonelli tried an advance in the interior without sufficient space. The contact was minimal but lethal. Leclerc lost control after touching the back of the Mercedes, and his car slid towards the barriers. End of the race also for him. Another destroyed red car. Another uncomfortable silence in Maranello's garage. In total, Ferrari not only lost an opportunity to add points, but evidenced his inability to execute decisions in uncertainty conditions. While other teams such as Mercedes or McLaren demonstrated a proactive response to asphalt changes, the Scuderia seemed to operate with a desperate slowness, as if each decision had to go through 3 bureaucratic filters before executing. The Zandvoort GP was much more than a double abandonment. It was a mirror that showed all the internal fractures that the 2025 season has been accumulating. From the outside, what happened in Zandvoort may seem an isolated incident, a bad afternoon in rain for a historical team. But when analyzing more detail, the double abandonment of Ferrari is simply the most crude manifestation of an accumulation of structural, technical, and human errors that have been managed from the first preseason test. This is not a problem of a career, it is the crystallization of a worrying trend. Ferrari has re-entered a poorly executed conservative decisions, lack of clear and, the most alarming, leadership, a disconnection between what is lived on the track and what is interpreted from the wall. The first real alert sign arrived in Australia, where the team already showed a conservative strategy, even shy before changing conditions. There they also failed to adapt quickly to the passage of a wet track to dry, losing rhythm in the key phases. In China, a small contact between Leclerc and Hamilton in the first curve uncovered an alarming lack of internal coordination. It was not a devastating shock, but a symbol that the two most talented pilots of the team were being left to their fate, without a firm tactical structure that supported them. Already at that time, there was talk within the paddock of an unplacated tension between the technical directorate and the pilots, where post-carrier meetings were unnecessarily lengthened and the engineers gave contradictory answers about the course of the development of the SF25. Zandvoort only amplified that fracture. Decision-making during the race was slow, inconsistent, and worse, without immediate learning. The choice to stop Leclerc before Hamilton, despite the fact that the British was the one who suffered the most with the grip, presented a diffuse hierarchy or, at least, poor management of strategic priorities. And when the two cars ended in the barriers, there were no forceful responses from those responsible. The reaction of the team director, Frédéric Vasseur, was moderate, almost diplomatic. He spoke of external factors and shared errors, without directing directly to the decisions that unleashed the disaster. But the data does not lie. So far from the 2025 season, Ferrari has lost more points due to execution errors than any other top 5. The strategies of evil stops, erratic communication between pilots and engineers, and the lack of confidence in the ideal setup for each circuit reveal that the SF25 project, although promising paper, is not being managed with the millimeter precision that the Formula One demands. While McLaren takes every opportunity to optimize its aerodynamic development and Mercedes reinforces its technical structure with advanced simulation methodologies, Ferrari seems caught in internal debates about who should have the last word. And in the midst of all this, Lewis Hamilton's figure emerges as a strategic unknown. Hepicampion arrived in Ferrari not only as a pilot, but as a change catalyst. However, after 3 races, its frustration is evident. His driving style has had to adapt to a car that still does not understand it all, and his technical suggestions often do not find an immediate echo in the team. The expected synergy with Leclerc does not finish curdling. There are no open conflicts, but an uncomfortable silence every time either is interrogated about the other. And this, in a team where the media pressure is constant, can climb quickly. The most serious thing is that the fans begin to lose patience. Not only the Italian tifosi, but also the global community of followers who expected 2025 to be Ferrari's final rebirth. After a 2024 season where glory was touched, this new year should consolidate the previous work. Instead, it has begun with doubts, internal friction, and a catastrophic result just before Monza. The situation is not insurmountable, but it requires an urgent turn. It is not enough to improve the car. Ferrari needs to meet his identity as a team, have a plan again, running with precision again, and above all, trust each other again. The next calendar stop is not just any race. It's Monza. It is Italy. It's home. For Ferrari, it is much more than an appointment in the calendar. It is the place where every year the faith of millions of tifosi is renewed or destroyed. And this year, after the disaster in Zandvoort, Monza represents the edge of the abyss. The margin of error is 0. Not only because the stands will be dyed red, waiting for an immediate response, but because the climate within Maranello has become unrestorably. In the halls of the headquarters, rumors of restructuring, crisis meetings, and tensions between technical departments that seem not to trust each other are already filtered. All that will reach its boiling point in the Temple of Speed. Monza is not a circuit that forgives. With tip speeds that exceed 340 km per hour and braking areas that demand maximum stability, it is not enough to have a fast car in classification. An accurate aerodynamic balance, a millimeter strategy, and perfect execution in each arrest is needed. And that is where Ferrari has systematically failed in 2025. The SF25 has proven to have an extremely narrow operation window. If the asphalt does not have the optimal temperature, if the wind changes direction, if the tires do not enter the right window, the car becomes unpredictable. And in Monza, where everything is decided in thousandths, that unpredictability can be lethal. The engineers know it. Therefore, the week between Zandvoort and Monza is being lived as a technical counter. The simulation department is working on extreme scenarios, testing from unprecedented low-load configurations to hybrid packages that combine previous racing data. The possibility of bringing new pieces for the diffuser has even mentioned, something that was not in the original plans. Not because they are ready, but because there is no other option. Ferrari cannot afford another paper. Not at home. Not in front of yours. But the real dilemma is not technical. It's emotional. Ferrari arrives in Monza with his 2 ridiculous pilots. Leclerc, with the wounded pride and the pressure of representing Italy with a dignified performance. Hamilton, with the accumulated frustration of having believed that his arrival would be the turning point and instead finding a messy environment full of old vices. The team must decide whether they give them freedom to run without restrictions or if it prioritizes a conservative strategy that ensures, at least, an arrival at the finish line without shocks. In both cases, the tension will be maximum. One more error, one more abandonment, and season 2025 could be marked as another lost year. Because if there are no results in Monza, the consequences could be immediate. It is already speculated that a new technical address is under evaluation, that certain key positions are under review. It has even been leaked that the board of directors is considering shortening deadlines for sports objectives, something that would put the stability of several departments in check. Therefore, Monza will not simply be the number 16 of the calendar. It will be the final thermometer. The sentence about whether Ferrari is still an aspiring title or if he has returned to his cycle of false promises and eternal reconstructions.